computer crashed. Oh, hey, we're on air. Oh, good. All right. Happy Thursday, everybody. It has been a week since we released Backup 1.5, which is super exciting. I have started upgrading some of my sites to it. I love it. It's just like Backdrop, only better. All right, so general announcements. Okay, before I start with anything in the agenda, we had started an issue in the PMC queue. I don't think it needs to be public, or I don't think it needs to be private, but I moved it in there just because I wanted to have somewhere we could talk about it. But we were trying to figure out how to manage releases of the software, and Wes made some great recommendations about how these meetings could be maybe made more efficient. And we're trying to figure out exactly what that should be. But if we know that the meetings aren't working the way they are, I figured we'd start trying to try some things that are a little bit different, see if we can get to a meeting that is the most efficient use of everyone's time. So for today's meeting, I removed some of the stuff that we talk about every week that doesn't necessarily add some value, the stuff like the sprints. I think it would be great if we have like an actual in-person sprint to encourage people to do that. We don't necessarily have to mention every week that we're going to be hanging out in Gitter after the meeting. I removed some of the meta issues around like JavaScript testing that haven't been getting any feedback. So hopefully this is just kind of a pared down version of the agenda. One of the things Wes recommended is if we could come up with a way to kind of focus our talk on what's going on in Backdrop and what's actually going on in Backdrop, whether it's, you know, what are we going to talk about next week or are we going to talk about this week, just kind of figure out like some way to set a focus so that it's not the same thing every week. And we do this a little bit naturally, like as people have questions and concerns, we'll focus on one issue or another. But if we could give the person who's working on that issue a week to prepare for whatever they're going to present on or talk about in the next week, that might also make things go a little better. Like we could do a bunch of work in preparation, or you could get all your questions lined up or whatever it is. So we'll see how it goes. And then the other thing, we just had an outreach meeting and we spent a bunch of time talking about the website in the outreach meeting. So I took a couple, did I change this? I don't know. Oh yeah, I took a couple of items off of the website section of this meeting's agenda so that it's narrowed down to the most important things to discuss. We haven't quite figured out how we're going to handle that long term. Whether it's we should just talk about one thing or we should just talk about the things that have been changed or whatever. And I know that Gregory, you're concerned about not being able to attend both weekly meetings. What I figured we would do this week is, because we had the outreach meeting this morning, we'll do a modified version of website this week, but we'll put the whole thing back on for next week. So at the very least, you'll get an update every 2 weeks. And then if we had any design tests, we would remove those from next week's weekly agenda. But it doesn't look like we have any of those. So we'll figure out over time how to make sure that everybody can stay up to date on what's going on, but that we're also not like repeating ourselves a lot from week to week, so that we can kind of make the best use of things. So as we go through this, please give us feedback if these changes aren't working. We will try something else. If you have an idea about how to make it better, let us know. We'll try that. I am not a project manager, so I don't know how to do this. Anything we can do to make it better, I think is going to be better for everyone. So yes. Oh, also, if anybody would like to become Backdrop's project manager and run these meetings, that would also be awesome. So yeah, okay. So Jeff asked what we did yesterday. Oh.
Project managing.
Oh. Nah, I'm not going to ask that. Okay, you can project manage if you like. Okay, anyway, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. At the top of the meeting, we usually have a section for general announcements. This week, Backdrop 2 or Calabox 2.0 is out. There's another issue we have a little lower down to talk about Calabox and Backdrop together, but we'll get to that later. If you would like to make a donation to Backdrop CMS, you can do that on the contribute page. We have t-shirts. We're getting some new ones just in time for Bad Camp. We have some hoodies of various sizes. We're getting, hopefully, a small run of the missing sizes in time for Bad Camp. So that should all be coming together soon-ish. But yeah, we're going to have more stuff for people. free Phpstorm licenses. If you're a contrib author, if you're a member of the Backdrop contrib group, we can get you a Phpstorm license and an info to email backdropcms.org. Also, if you guys think it's not valuable for me to say this stuff every week, we can take this off the agenda. Follow up, appreciate it on that. Updates for the PMC. We don't have any updates this week because there's still a bunch of stuff that we're talking about. But we mentioned it last week, we're thinking about imposing a 2-week feature freeze before every major release. And there was a bunch of confusion about what a feature freeze actually is. This is language that like Nate and I are familiar with from working in Drupal, because Drupal has a feature freeze, and as being a core developer, you're familiar with that. But as it became clear very quickly, the world at large has no idea what that means. So I just wanted to talk about that really quickly in this meeting, and then we can talk about if we decide to do it or not in next week's meeting once everyone's had a chance to kind of weigh in and vote on that issue. But the proposal is that we're going to have an issue queue. It's going to be tagged with a bunch of issues. Some of them are going to be labeled feature requests. And some of those features requests are going to be big things like installing references module or getting some kind of media equivalent, or in the last few releases we had a new core theme going. These are huge chunks of work, and trying to figure out like how to manage those pieces of work and where to manage them in a process that's going to work. We're also working out how to make that easier. But it makes me really nervous to take one of these huge pieces of work and commit it like the night before we release the software. And a lot of that is because like even though the piece may be working perfectly on its own, like as a contrib project or whatever, when you stick it in core, there's a bunch of stuff that comes together that you might not have noticed when it was in contrib. And it would be great if we could get that in sooner so that number one, we can get more eyes on it. Number two, as we're working on the rest of core, we'll start to notice places where maybe there wasn't an issue before and there is now because of the feature, whether it's just an aesthetic thing like, oh, you know, there's a new tab here or whatever, or it's a functional thing like, oh, I can't push the button anymore. It would be great to be able to find those things earlier so that we had some time to fix them. As it is now, we kind of push everything at the last minute and then we do a bug fix release later, right? And then we tell everyone after we do the bug fix release. I think we could just push that entire process like forward 2 weeks. That would be good. And especially now that we have more and more people using Backdrop, keeping the software they're running stable is going to be more important over time. So what that's going to look like is in the issue queue, if you have something that's tagged feature release, it needs to actually be committed to the project more than 2 weeks before the software comes out. So in the next version, what we're looking at for a real example is references module. References module will need to be committed to core before January 1st. And if it's not committed before January 1st, it gets bumped to 1.7 instead of being added in 1.6. And what I'm hoping this will mean is that we can commit references before it's completely finished, right? Like if it works and it does what it wants, but the user interface is a little clunky or it needs a little design or refresh, like we don't have to keep kicking that issue back to needs work. We can say, okay, this is a minimal viable product, put it in, and then we'll have another issue that's like clean up the user interface, and we'll have another issue that's clean up the text strings, and we can work on all of those other little follow-up issues in that 2-week period after it was initially committed. And so it'll give us more chance to review the functionality before we have to cut the release.
At that time, can we, at that 2-week period, January 1st, can we cut 1.6.0 RC1 tag so that maybe we get more end user Backdrop installs and test that and give us that feedback?
That is also an excellent idea. I think that's great. I think doing a release candidate tag in conjunction with the feature freeze is perfect. It's yeah, excellent suggestion. And so what that would mean is that if you have, we actually ended up doing this with we added a feature in 1.5 that was the ability to embed a node as a block. So we have a new block type that you can reference an existing piece of content. And Document made this pull request that was like an exact port of what Panels does. And Nate was like, great, put it in. And then there was a bunch of follow-up issues that are like, we should improve the user interface and we should, you know, change the names of things. And it was a great example of like, just get it in if it works and then come back later and clean it up. And we did that a little bit with Basis, but we didn't really have very much time. So we had, okay, just put it in. And then we had like 500 issues show up where we're like, okay, we could change this, and we should push this, and we can change this thing here, and we can do that. And I think it would be great if we could also manage, like for these large features, there are gonna be a lot of those issues, especially if we put things in earlier before they're quite as finished. We could even handle that with a specific milestone that's like 1.6 references. And all of the issues that come up relating to references go into the 1.6 references milestone, so that you can have 1.6, which includes references, which is now closed. And then you have 1.6 references, which are all the follow-ups you need to work on in the next 2 weeks. And I think there's a way that we can kind of manage that sanely over time. So feature freeze just means new features don't get in after the last 2 weeks. It doesn't mean nothing gets in. There's going to be a ton of improvements that can still happen in that period of time, but it won't be any of these huge, we're going to add in this massive piece of functionality. Hopefully it'll make things a little easier on all of us. It'll help give us a little extra focus in the last 2 weeks. We're not like, oh, I found this issue in the issue queue that got skipped in the last version, but I really want it now and I can squeeze it in, because no, that's too close. We have done that in the past. We love doing that, but it's getting to the point where we need to be a little more careful. So yes, there's also some talk. We haven't figured out yet whether we want to do, how we want to manage feature branches. I think it's an excellent idea to create a committed, like take a pull request and commit it on a specific feature branch and work there. I think we also need milestones for each feature branch if we're going to do that, just so that we can keep the issues for the branch in a sensible place. They don't just go directly into the core queue with all of the other core issues. Having ways to keep our, we don't want to miss one. We don't want to, just to figure out a way to keep organized around that is good. But yeah, so we're trying to figure out, like, at the PMC level, how do we manage this in a way that makes sense? We've had several tries of doing it the way we've been doing it that have maybe made us think that it's not the best way to do it. So we're going to figure out for 1.6 something else to try. Maybe that won't be the best way either, but at least we'll be trying new things. So thoughts there. All right. So
related.
What was that?
Can you say something related to that? See how the issue with Calabox and the outdated Docker image that we had? Yep. I had filed an, if everybody could take a look at that, I have filed an issue. I've seen that in other projects. What they do is they file an issue and they say release version X, and they have a copy paste from a template. This is just drafted random things that I wrote there, but I think that we should do that with each release and have specific people assigned to tasks so that we can get the load off of you, Nate, and whoever else. So this is a good thing to sort of like tick the boxes, and then when we are done with the pre-release tasks, we do the release, and then everybody jumps to the post-release tasks, and we do those as well. We don't forget to send the newsletter or update the Docker image or anything. I think that's a really good thing. Yeah. And it all started with, sorry, that's the second issue, with this one. All right, that's what I wanted to say. Sorry, the issue 280 in Backdrop Ops was where it started. We should have a place with templates that we can copy paste to issues and sort of like get tasks done, and not put everything in one person's plate. Delegate.
Yeah, I think this looks great. I love this idea. There are starting to be a lot of things that we need to do for each release, including not only the software we're managing, but now there's a Pantheon repository we have to push to, and there's a Docker thing that we need to update, and just keeping track of all of the things we have to manage and who has to do them and when they need to get done is an excellent idea. Yay, project management skills. I don't know where they should live, but yes, let's figure out where to do it, and I would love it if we could get that set up. Even, I think, might even be a good exercise to go through that for 1.5, just to see that we have a process in place, and we've done it. I know 1.5 came out a week ago, but we could definitely do at least the like release and post-release tasks, and then get set up and ready to do it again in 1.6. Or I don't know, do we need to do this for bug fix releases too? Maybe we should have a different list for both. Like the bug fix release probably won't need a newsletter, but it will need like to get pushed to Pantheon. So having a modified version for one would be great. But Fantastic. I'll add a comment on these later, but I think that looks like a great idea. Does anyone have any reason we shouldn't do it? No. Everyone loves it. Okay. Alrighty. So under infrastructure tasks, Gregory just mentioned this, but we did have this issue with the Docker image needing to get updated. So Jeff, I noticed you offered to take that on. That would be fantastic. I assigned the issue to you in GitHub, so feel free to take over whenever you want. Other things on this list are the Drush integration. I don't know what issue 1682 is. Do you want to give us an update on that one? We'll go look at it.
That's the PR to put Drush site local on the Pantheon upstream of Backdrop.
Okay.
So I'd love to get that tested and remediate if there's any issues with it and get released on Pantheon officially. That would be great.
Okay. Does that also include moving Backdrop into a subdirectory? Or is that different?
No,
okay.
It doesn't include that.
Okay, I want to look at that. So many things I want to do. I want to look at that because I also want to get a Drush working on Pantheon so that we can get Backdrop to be installable by anyone who has a Pantheon account without needing to know where our site is. But also because I would love to be able to figure out our Git file deploy workflow, which I think we could also solve with some of the new tools that we're going to be using in that issue. And I want this to get done first. So I'll look at that today. I keep saying that. I'll definitely look at that today, and we'll try and move forward on that. Okay, so backdropcms.org. There are two important things that I wanted to talk about today. The first one is the showcase of sites built with Backdrop. This is something that keeps coming up as everybody comes to our website, and then their first question is, do you have a showcase, or do you have a place that I can see sites that are built with Backdrop? And the answer is, kind of. We're working on one. It's not there yet. You can put your sites in, but you can't see them. And I would love to get that finished. So if anyone has any free time, haha, I know that's very funny, but wants to help work on building things, we need a layout for the showcase site, which should be, might be a little complicated because it'll be dependent on the data that we get in. We should have some data in there we can use as a test point, which is why we've been allowing people to put their stuff in. We also need some theming on it. So I know everyone is really busy right now because we were all working so hard on Backdrop for the last few weeks. We have other work that needs attending to. But that is kind of first and foremost on our priorities for backdropcms.org. So if anyone has any free cycles and wants to work on that, that would be great. Second most important thing is the documentation section. The only reason I put this up here as being super important is because I think it's pretty much done. We know that it needs screenshots. I think that's fine. We can publish it before it has screenshots in there and people can still use it. I also would love to get more eyes on the language that's in there. Right now, it is very detailed. It goes into almost every feature in core, has some information on how to use it, which I think is awesome, but it's also a little bit overwhelming. And so I've been trying to change some of the language in there just around how features are described to make it a little bit less scary. So I don't know, this is something that Drupal is guilty of too, where sometimes the terminology sounds very like robotic just because the words we use like entity are nondescript nouns. So I've been trying to add a little more like, I don't know, friendliness into the language and removing, like making sentences shorter and just trying to make it seem a little different than Drupal. I'm not sure it's working or not. But it could definitely use more eyes on it. I've only gone through like 2 or 3 pages and then realized I had other things that are more important to do. So if anyone loves reading technical documentation, this is a great place, backdropcms.org/user-guide. A great place to spend some time, do some heavy, light reading. And we would definitely love any feedback you have on there. We have revisions turned on the content, so we can make you an editor and you can just go in and make changes. And if we don't like them, we can revert them. If we do like them, it will get better. So that's a good place for people to jump in and help. All right, so Backdrop, the product. I haven't gone through the issue queue since we released, but I have been kind of keeping track of issues as they come in. We do need to issue a 1.5 bug fix release. There are a couple of bugs that are fairly urgent, and there are a lot of them that are completely not that important. We'll get to them when we get to them. The one that I think should be on our important bug fix issue is that we spent a lot of time fixing the ability to insert images into blocks in 1.5, but somehow now the button that allows you to insert images into blocks is not showing on blocks. And so we fixed the bug, but we also somehow accidentally removed the feature. I would love it if we could get that feature back now that it's not as broken for people. And I think that especially for existing people who had relied on their images in their existing sites, that is kind of broken for them. So I'd love to get that resolved before the 1.5.1 release. And we do have a GitHub issue milestone for 1.5.1, but it has a ton of stuff in it. I don't think all of that stuff is going to get done for 1.5.1. But anyone who wants to grab a bug and work on it, there's a good list there. And as many of those as we can get fixed before we release would be great. I don't know, Jeff, if you've seen anything else come through that you think is important enough that it should be on our important bug fix list. He is not feeling well today, unfortunately, so we'll get his feedback later, maybe.
Okay. Jen?
Yep.
One thing, well, I don't know if it's that critical, but it seems like a usability issue to me is that the with the new homepage layout, the primary navigation, I have created an issue for it. The primary navigation block, menu block, is not set to drop down, whereas the rest of that site, which is the default layout, is set as a drop down. So when I try to create, that's what a fact that I feel is like I did go and create a second and third level menus, but they weren't showing up on the front page, and I go, what's going on? And then I think it was Herb that pointed it out that you're editing the default layout, not the homepage, and we have it there as a hierarchical tree.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's I don't know why we would have a menu displayed as drop down in the rest of the website, not in the front. I don't know if it was.
I'm sure that was an oversight. I don't know what went in first, the front page layout or the home page layout, but it's probably a conflict of like two features going in, and somehow the setting didn't get set where it should have gotten set. But that definitely, I agree, that sounds important. It's going to be very weird for new people who are installing this backdrop to run into that. So yeah, I would say that definitely goes on the important bug fixes.
Not only weird, I wanna showcase that the drop down menus out of the box in the Drupal South thing, and I wanna people that, you know, there you go, you have it out of the box, but oh no, you don't.
Yeah, we'll get that fixed. That seems important. Okay, and then 1.6. So this is the next major release currently scheduled for January 1st. January 15th, possible bug fix on January 1st, or feature freeze on January 1st. We'll talk about it next week. But features we know are going to be in it are an entity reference, which is one that got bumped from this last release. And one of the things that came up when we were talking about the solution to the images getting deleted when they were inserted in blocks is the fact that both WordPress and Drupal 8 now have some sort of central media management system included. We have a module in Drupal 7 called File Entity that gives us a kind of a strange interface for managing files that works a lot like our interface for managing content. WordPress has something similar, but is very different in how it handles images and it handles the rest of content. I would love if we could figure out some way to set up a asset manager tool. And I don't know whether it's going to be something more like File Entity or something more like Media or something more like what WordPress has. But there's a bunch of places that I think this is going to solve some problems for us. Right now, we have some pretty serious core bugs where if you place an image somewhere, for example, into a block, and then you delete the block, that image will never get deleted. So if you accidentally upload something that could be super bad news to your site, and then you're like, oh, I need to take that off my site, it's super bad news, and you delete the block, you can't actually delete the image. And there's no user interface anywhere that'll let you get to that image that was previously uploaded and delete it. So if you have database access, you can of course go into the database tables and delete them. You can go onto the disk and delete the file, but I think we need a user interface to manage this stuff too. And so trying to figure out what that user interface looks like and how to integrate it with the rest of Backdrop is going to be a huge undertaking. And so, but it's also something that's really important, right? Like media management. Media is one of the top modules for Drupal. Media management is something that makes WordPress a killer tool. It would be great if we could start thinking about how to solve our media problem in Backdrop as well and create something that's super well integrated with all of the bits and pieces, like the rich text editor, the article creation interface, like all of the stuff that we need to manage that any file upload field. And so I put it on the list here to talk about prioritizing for 1.6 because I thought that one of the solutions we were approaching for the previous images deleted by garbage collection issue was going to be dependent on, we can only get this in if we also add an interface. But we ended up going with a different solution, so it's not necessarily super urgent. But I still think it's a big problem. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Maybe what would be better is if we scheduled that for 1.7 and focused all of our effort for 1.6 on references, because that's now missed 2 releases. If we can get references done in 1.6, then we can kind of change gears and focus on media for 1.7. But I wanted to throw it out there and see what you guys thought about doing a media solution in Backdrop.
Do we have an issue for that or not yet?
There is one somewhere in the queue. It's one of the old ones that I dug up during the 1.5 release when we were working on that bug fix for images automatically deleted in core. It was something like, I can find it.
Yeah, I say because it sounds like we need a lot of decisions about how that interface should look and operate and what it should do before we can actually delve into the work.
Yeah, and like all the different places it needs to integrate and how, like if we're going to be putting in something that's going to have APIs, we've got to make sure that, you know, that we get it right because we aren't going to be able to change those until Backdrop 2.
So yeah, I think we should start by turning that issue into a meta and getting some decisions and input on those things.
Okay. And then it could be that some of the sub issues get slated for 1.6, but the major feature gets added later, and that would give us some time too for, you know, if we can't get the main issue in until we get these other problems solved, we could have a recourse for that. Okay, sounds good. I'll add a link in here to the issue, and then we can work on that offline, and then we'll pull it out of the 1.6 milestone. Or maybe we'll leave it and we can bump it at feature freeze. Okay. We also we have this meta issue for improving the rich text editor, and we got a couple of fixes in for that in at the last minute before 1.5, which is good. There's a bunch more that we need to work on. And so that meta got pushed to 1.6. I think this is the kind of thing where we're always going to be improving and iterating on that rich text editor because everybody is always going to use it. So it's good that we have an issue that we can continue to kind of push along. I would love to see that get a little more attention. So if anyone is particularly interested in working on CK editor plugins, that could be a good place to work. It's issue number 1087 in the Backdrop queue. All right, we do have a roadmap on backdropcms.org. I updated it a couple of weeks before the 1.5 release so that we could see what the 1.5 release would look like without references in it. But it is, what we're gonna do for 1.6 is still kind of up in the air. So yeah, I would say let's see what we think. Like right now, we only have one major feature slated, and that is references module, which is gonna be big. But it would be great if we could figure out what other features we wanted to see in 1.6 so we can get a little priority for what we should be working on in the next few months. Let's see. Gregory, do you want to take over the community growth section?
Yep, sure. So, right, this update is for the 2 past weeks since we skipped that section in the previous dev meeting. So we have 313 total projects on backdropcms.org. No, sorry, GitHub. That's +4 since last meeting. 229 projects with official releases on backdropcms.org. That's +5 since last meeting. 367 releases. That's project releases. That's +12. 56 total backdrop contributors. We have no change. We have 15 pending applications. And then 27 organization profiles on backdropcms.org. That's +1. 360 total user accounts on backdropcms.org. +5 since last meeting. And we have close to 6,500 Backdrop CMS core downloads, which is +245 since last meeting. Wow, exactly.
It's nice to have a release and then have a bunch of people go try it. That's great. All right. So upcoming events. We have Bad Camp coming up soon. We've got a bunch of good things going on in Bad Camp. We have a Backdrop Summit, which will be happening on Thursday. We've got a bunch of speakers lined up. I'll probably update that page on the Bad Camp site. We have a Backdrop training, which will be all day on Friday. We have a session, which will either be Saturday or Sunday. And I just wanted to throw it out to anyone. We lost Luke, he was here earlier. Anyone who's going to be at Bad Camp who wants to participate in any of these events, I think it would be great to get as many people as possible representing Backdrop. I don't want it to be Nate and I giving another talk on Backdrop at Bad Camp. I want it to be the Backdrop community talking about Backdrop at Bad Camp. And so we talked a little about it a little bit in the outreach meeting. We're going to have Wes and Jack participate in the summit. Jack will help with the training. Wes and Jack will both be in the talk. I'll also want to reach out to Jim Birch. He's going to be there to see if he wants to get involved. People who aren't necessarily PMC members, but who are involved in Backdrop should also feel comfortable talking about it at Bad Camp. So just anywhere we can get people involved, I think is going to be good, just to kind of show, you know, it's been a couple of years, but like there is a community behind this thing, and these are the faces that are representing it, not necessarily like same people you've heard from before. So I don't know, Jeff, if you're going to be here for Bad Camp. Probably not. You're pretty far away. Yeah. But anyone who is interested watching this video later, if you want to be a part of these things, let us know. All right. If you're interested in buying a book, there are 2 books, Beginning Backdrop and Migrating from Drupal, both available on Apress and Amazon. I'm feeling like we can probably remove that item from this weekly agenda because we talk about it all the time. They're on the website. They've been out for a while. Okay. General discussion. Oh, amazing. Who is our designated note taker this week? Thank you, Wes. So one of the things we also talked about in trying to make these meetings more effective is to have somebody take notes during the meeting and create a list of follow-ups that we should do. And that way we can post this information. I don't know where we're going to post it long-term, but for now we'll post it in Gitter. So anyone who's sprinting this afternoon on Backdrop will have a reference to the things that we should be working on. And then we'll be able to follow up next week and make sure those things got addressed. So thanks, Wes, for taking notes. That is fantastic. Is there any other comments or feedback anyone wants to talk about today?
I made a GitHub project, which those are awesome. They seem a lot better than meta issues for issues with basis. I'm trying to go through and do a tutorial of how someone could subtheme with basis, and so I'm actually doing it myself and running into like little dumb issues that a few of them are hard to fix. They are hurting my brain. So if anyone wants to check that out, I will put it in the follow-ups and a link to the project that I cooked up. I think that was all I had. But yeah, I'd love help, and if anyone has any issues with basis, throw it in there, please.
Doc Wilmot has created the hero versions of the layouts, which are actually, they have a container. That's a big help. I don't know what we plan to do with the actual core to allow it to have full width. but this is a good workaround for people that want to get it done now, sort of.
So what, do you know what the name of that project is?
Hero.
Hero. Okay, so this is when we originally put in layouts, it was in 1.4, and it went in again like the night before release, and we're like, hey, that's good, push, right? And then here we are in 1.5 where we're like, let's add the hero thing, and we're like, oh wait, this doesn't work because we made a mistake back in 1.4, and now we have this problem where changing the markup in core is hard, right? That's kind of an API change because anyone who's overridden those templates aren't going to get the changes that you push to the core versions, and anyone who's depending on the markup being in the format of the core version for their CSS might have their CSS break. And so we're stuck in this, like, how do we change the markup of the layouts now that, oops, we got it wrong, that's fine, how do we fix it? And so what we decided to do short term, and Takwama made this contrib project called Hero that adds an extra container that allows the Hero region to be full width, but it does override all 10 core layouts. So we were talking a little bit about it in Basis, where we're like, should we just override the core layouts in the Basis theme so you can see how these work? I think that might be a good option for getting these into core. I don't think we can just change the ones in core, because the ones in core, that might break people's sites. But we should also slate this for 1.2 or Backdrop 2, where one of the things we need to fix is the markup in the core layouts so that we don't have this kind of cascading where we put the fixed solution. So I don't know, Wes, if you want to take a look at that project and see what you think of that markup, and if you would be a good candidate for Basis. I know overriding 10 layouts is not ideal. It makes it messy for like having a nice clean starting point, but if it fixes this problem, that might be worth the mess.
Couldn't we also add like one layout to core and have it be like the default homepage kind of thing? Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there are more options potentially, but yeah, like to think
adding a layout could do it too. But people, with a special like hero region,
right? Sure. So it'd basically be like a version of the existing homepage layout, and we just call it like, you know, whatever it is, _hero or something. I don't know. But yeah, including them in Basis would also work. We just have to. It does bring up the problem though of if somebody makes a Basis site now, does that mess them up? Because if they sub-themed off of it, they're going to inherit things.
Yeah, I mean, so we'll have to figure out, like, Jeff and Nate and whoever will have to talk about how to manage that. But maybe we could squeeze that in like 1.5.1, and then the number of people who have like created and deployed sub themes is lower. Like it could be like a bug fix thing rather than like if it's a new thing, it'll probably have to wait.
Yeah.
And then of course when it's waiting, that increases the risk of people using it. Yeah, it's definitely messy. But I like the idea of doing a new layout. But again, that's the kind of thing where if we can get it in 1.5.1, we can switch the homepage to use the new homepage layout. But if we wait very long, we're going to have to make that something that only affects new sites starting in 1.6 or something.
One other thing.
I know that this might sound like a big hack, but what if this was an option in the hero block? People could try it. They could see if it breaks things for them. If it breaks, they can reverse.
It will break things. The layout needs to make that decision. The block can't. From a CSS perspective, it creates a lot of bugs, unfortunately. I tried doing that. One thing, the Basis contrib theme, I changed the theme name and it's still there. So now it's Basis_contrib, and I put in the README like this is, you know, a version of the core theme, but to work on experimental features and maybe add features in here that we're not going to add to core. So that's around. Nothing's new in it right now. It's exactly the same as the core version with like a few additional files that I took out for core that don't really affect anything.
Okay. Does it have an official release?
Yeah. I just made it yesterday.
Okay.
So I just renamed the existing repo, so it has all the Git history. but now it's called basis_contrib. And I unchecked, or it's production ready according to the release. So,
right. So one thing I was thinking of, you can decide how you want to handle this, but if you wanted the contrib version to not be available on backdropcms.org, you can unpublish that node. Like if it's intended for developers, like I don't think it's not, I mean, if you change the name, there shouldn't be any problem with running like both basis and basis contrib.
Yeah.
So it's probably
that's why I changed the name. I'm running both of them right now just to make sure I could.
Okay.
And it works. So, but yeah, I think it could potentially be in the future. It might be for everyone, but right now it's the same.
Okay. All right. Anything else we should talk about? Okay, well, thank you, Wes, for being our designated note taker. Excellent job. Also, let us know what you think about like the format of these meetings. This one is kind of halfway between what we had and what we might eventually get to, but I think it kind of worked. I don't know. Let's keep an eye on it going forward, though, and see if we think it's helping or hurting. Or what else we should try if you have other ideas.
I think, did someone else make a basis project in GitHub? Because there are two now, and mine's newer, but I'm sorry. No one on the call. All right, I'll figure that out. Sorry.
All right, thanks for coming, everyone. See you on Gitter.